7 minutes in Intermodal.
So, welcome to our second episode. Now we're here with Braden. Braden has an interesting history within a various amounts of space with logistics, but he's been the consultant, freelance consultant for the past 3 to 4 years. And so he has a very, very interesting perspective on the market, very active on LinkedIn, which is how we got connected. And so I know he's going to have some good insight for us. Braden, thanks for coming on. You're calling from Detroit, right?
Yep, Detroit metropolitan area. Yep. And John, thank you for having me on the podcast. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, of course. Like I said, when I had this idea, and I thought of rail, I thought of you. I know we had very interesting conversations in the past. So on the rail side, I know you got a lot of good insight. Now I see the Detroit hat, so
Yeah.
I should have known then. We'll work
That's
on
right.
getting you. We'll get you some Dallas gear or Miami gear pretty soon. Don't worry.
No, Dallas, no. No, only D is for Detroit.
Yeah, give us an intro. Tell us about, like I said, you have a very interesting experience. So tell us how you got started with just logistics overall and how you became more specialized into rail.
Okay, well, I'll say this. My career, let's see, I'm 41 now, so started working fairly young. I worked in various industries, retail, warehousing, inventory, grocery, food service,
Yeah,
transportation, logistics, manufacturing. I've done the operations. I've been labor. So I've been through various sectors. I'll add healthcare in there as well, mainly on the logistics
right.
side.
Okay.
Probably about, I want to say maybe 10 years ago, I struck out on my own. I decided I wanted to take that dive into ownership and doing my own thing. And so actually started with healthcare. I started out doing pharmaceuticals and nuclear medicine.
Okay.
And I eventually looked at, the automotive scene. I mean, being in Detroit, it's kind of natural.
Of course.
So,
Yeah.
I looked at the JIT side and eventually got into that doing JIT. Moved in a little bit of the logistics space, doing some flatbed, LTL, truckload, and a little bit of rail, some carload, some intermodal
Right.
shipments, but mostly truck on my end. The rail experience, it's always going to be hit or miss. You'll have your good days, your bad days, but that's freight in general. Freight's very complex, and
Yeah.
it's essentially how you deal with the situation. Communication, trust. Trust is a big thing. You got to display to your customer you're reliable, and you keep that consistency with that reliability, and that's what actually builds that trust, and that's what keeps them coming back. But yeah,
Yeah, of course.
the rail industry side is very interesting, I'll say.
Is it very inconsistent? Everything's cyclical, I get it.
Yeah.
But with what you're talking about with the problems, is it very inconsistent? Has it always been that way?
The thing with the rails is, yeah, it's not that it's consistently inconsistent, but they have their bright spots, they have their low spots.
Okay.
And I'll say this, it does depend on
Oh,
the customer. Coal was a huge cash cow for the railroads as far as revenue. Coal probably paid the highest
right.
revenue per carload. Let's say, you know, Peabody mining, coal mine in Wyoming. They come to BNSF or UP, say, hey, we need you to move so much tonnage on this contract. The contract may be 5 years or whatnot, maybe 10 years. Railroads will
Right.
be there in a heartbeat. It's a simple unit train. You load out at Peabody. Maybe that coal is going to a power plant in Georgia. High paying freight,
Right.
it's easy freight to handle. Load, point A, unload at point B. Railroads love that kind of traffic. It's simple and it's not complex. You look at something like
Sure.
Intermodal, very complex, multiple channels, multiple origin destinations. In fact, you can look at a similarity between intermodal containers and people, how people travel. Same thing. We, originate at multiple destinations. We may go through a hub, we may get
Right.
on a trunk flight, and then we, desegregate to our various destinations. So it's that complexity that railroads have a hard time dealing with. And, going back to the previous example of a simple coal train from Wyoming to Georgia, oh, they love that. It's easy for them. So they're always going to be attracted to that
No,
unit bulk traffic.
yeah, I like you made that comparison. That makes sense. that makes sense with the coal compared to the intermodal. So one more question for you. With what you do on freelance consulting, if there's one thing you'd like to let the rail intermodal, the intermodal industry know about you and what you do, what is it?
Well, I'll tell you what, the consulting side, I'll say it's been very slow. I've only had maybe a few, how should I say, advisements. And mine specifically was with a hedge fund. So
Okay.
they were actually concerned about the impending merger with Canadian Pacific and Kansas City Southern. And I had wrote an article on LinkedIn, geez, probably about, let's say almost 3 years ago, about the pros and cons, mostly the cons of the network and how it's going to look and how it's not going to be this intermodal powerhouse that they were touting. There's just too many conflicting points, and then there's lack of track access east of Chicago to connect with the
Right.
rest of the network in Canada. And I basically told
Right.
them, like, well, I don't see this, intermodal powerhouse they're touting. Now, carload's a different story. You have a ton of forest products from Western Canada, specifically British Columbia. Energy is a huge one from Alberta, especially with what's called drewbit, which is
Right.
a diluted heavy crude. It makes it easier to load and unload within a tank car. So that's a big opportunity. Going to the Gulf Coast, obviously, from Canada. And if you follow the oil and gas, the Gulf Coast is geared toward that heavy crude
Yeah,
refining.
of course.
So that's a perfect
Yeah,
lane
yeah,
for them.
yeah.
Hardisty, Alberta, there's a huge terminal out there where they load the oil trains, and they may go down to St. James in Louisiana. I believe CPKC is looking to develop Beaumont and Port Arthur potentially going forward. But
Right in
yeah,
Texas.
yeah, essentially that Gulf Coast, market, which is pretty big, obviously, for oil and gas. But yeah, as far as intermodal, I don't see it.
Nice.
But that's how I actually end up
No.
in that, in that field. And matter of fact, the client, um, one of their firms I work with in New York actually reached out to me over LinkedIn in a DM, and that's how that happened.
Hmm.
So I advised them on a few
Nice.
things. Me and their analysts had a few calls, and they made a decision on their positions in the industry. So yeah, that's how I ended up in that part.
Well, I
And
think we can have a complete 7 minute episode, or even actually even longer. I'm sure it could be 60 minutes about the whole investment side of things into the rail intermodal industry. So that's intriguing. I wasn't
yeah,
expecting that from the consulting side, but that makes so much sense. But we're going to wrap it up now. I'm definitely got to get you back on. Thanks for all your insight. We're going to stay connected, and we'll go from there.
all right, John. Well, thanks for having me again.